Hi everyone, I'm Sammy from Mad for Markers, and today I'm colouring in with Copic markers this gigantic wombat image. This is an image that I drew last year for Inktober, but I didn't get around to either inking it or colouring it until today. So I'm starting with my W0 and I'm just doing lots and lots of flicks following the shape of the wombat. So coming down his leg, going along his back, lots and lots of flicks. This video has actually been sped up into double time, so I'm not flicking quite as fast as you see here in the video. And I'm just covering his whole body. Fairly rough flicks, some of them bigger than others, but this is just laying down the base for the image. I'm sorry about that shadow. It's such a rainy day today. I didn't quite realise how bad the shadow was until I've rewatched it. However, I'd like to still post this video so that you can see how to colour fur, and next time I video I'll make sure that I don't have as many shadows from my marker and my hand getting in the way. So just covering the back of his leg there. Now as you can see, I turn the book around a bit as I colour so that I can flick in the right direction and make it a bit easier. So onto his face now, just following around that eye and lots of flicks. Each flick makes it look more like a hair strand. So then I've gone on to W1, just adding some depth in. So I'm just going into the shadow areas, so under his chin, and then his head would stick out a bit from his body, so that's why I've done that shadow at the top of his head. And then just adding a bit of definition on the face, so adding some more flicks there. So my little flicks from the W0 are still underneath, but the W1 just adds in more contrast and a bit more definition. And I'm going to just keep adding in a few more colours until I'm happy with the depth that I have. So I've chosen a few markers, I've got my W's, and then I'm going to also add in some E's at the end. So it's just a process of building up the layers, making sure there's lots of flicks showing so that it looks like the fur on the gigantic wombat. So I'm still with my W1, I'm making it a little bit darker again under that fairy for that cast shadow. This is the same type of flicks that I do when I'm colouring hair on a person, although the flicks for the hair are normally longer on a person than they are for the fur of the wombat. So I'm just continuing to build up that layer and get a bit of definition in between the flicks so that there's the different colours. I had the W0, now I'm using the W1, and I'm about to move on even darker to a W3. So just building up that shadow under the chin and in behind the legs. And you can see that the flicks stand out a little bit more now that there's a darker colour there. And I'm just continuing to build this wombat fur with lots of flicks and just following the shape that I've already got drawn out there and mapped out with my other colours. So it's fairly rough, but you know, fur's a bit rough, and I'm still learning how to do animals really, so it's a continual learning process. The more you do, the better you get. So these flicks are hard when you first start off, but the thing to do is make sure you start your marker at the same point and flick the same direction each time you do your flick. Otherwise they'll be much more awkward shaped and they won't be as consistent. And on an actual animal, the fur is rooted into the skin and comes out. So you want it always to be coming out in the same direction from the same point, if that makes sense. So I've just moved it on again to a darker marker. I'm now using a W5, and you can see that the contrast that's showing up is just helping to define his face and his features a little bit more, and it helps to show that his back leg is behind when I have that shadow under his chin area. And yeah, just building up the shape of this big wombat. So basically I'm just following what I did with my W3, but making it slightly darker by putting the W5 in, and I'm not coming out quite as far and doing slightly thinner flicks. But again, under the fairy I'm making it darker, so I've got that cast shadow showing up there. Then I take my W3 again and I just flick back over it, just blending out those lines a bit. So continuing in the same direction again as always, and just blending out that W5, making it less harsh of a line. And I really love seeing the image come to life as you build these layers. You can see that he's starting to jump off the page a bit more than he did when he was just a line art image. Don't you think she's a lucky fairy getting to ride on a gigantic wombat? What fun would that be? Although he might be a little bit scary too. You'd want to know that he was safe and wouldn't bite you because she's so tiny. Anyway, I'm digressing. I'm just continuing to flick out here with my W3 marker, just building up the layers even more. There's so many flicks that are involved in building up this big guy. And now I've moved on again to my W1 and I'm just flicking out again. So I'm not going quite back to where I did the W5, but I'm just blending out where I had the W3 and adding in more flicks on his face and back and just building up that fur texture look a little bit more. Just continuing to blend out those flicks a little bit and soften those lines. I'm doing this in my Express IT blending card journal. I do love these journals and it really makes it easy to keep your artwork in one place. Now I've moved on to the E43, just bringing a little bit of brown in. So the warm greys before were nice warm colour, but I just want it to look a little bit more brown. So I'm putting the E43 into my shadow areas and just a bit smaller flicks than what I was doing before, but just basically following around all those areas where I have the dark colour, making it deeper with the E43 and just adding in a little bit of brown as I said before. You do need a lot of patience building up these layers and continuing to flick, although it is quite therapeutic. It's quite relaxing as you tune out and just do these flicks. And as I said before, it's really fun to see the image come to life before your eyes as you build up the layers. And when you're doing this sort of blending, you don't need to have the colours that are normally the colour blending families that you'd choose. So I'm doing, as you can see, the warm greys and the E's, and the E's that I'm using aren't all in the same colour blending group, so I don't have all E40s. I've got E43 and then I'm also going to use E70 and 71. So you don't have to follow the rules as much when you have the flicks because you're not really trying to blend it into a nice little circle, so it doesn't matter so much. Now I'm on to my E71 and this marker's actually running out a little bit, but I didn't mind for this image because it just made it look a bit rougher as well. So then went on to the E70 and just making, it's quite a light colour, but it just contrasts with that W shading a little bit and makes him look a bit browner. And I did want the wombat to look a little bit more brown than it was originally. Just adding a bit more flicks here and a bit more fur in with this E70, so it just adds a little bit more definition into him where he didn't have it already. Now I'm about to finish with the markers and move on to my texture using the colourless blender. So I'm using the big bottle, but you can also use a normal refill sized bottle. And I've just put it onto the cloth and now I'm just dabbing the cloth onto the coloured image, and as I dab it pushes away the colour that I have there and creates that extra fur look. So the longer you hold it down, the more it pushes away the colour. So I'm just going slowly, short dabs at the beginning, and then I hold it down for a bit longer as I want to add a little bit more texture on. And I'm just doing it slowly because I don't want to push away too much colour all at once. And if you wet the cloth too much, it will also just push away all the colour and you won't get that texture there. So slow and steady wins the race. I've just zoomed in a little bit there for you so you can see the texture coming out a little bit more. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed colouring the gigantic wombat today. And if you'd like to leave any feedback on this video, I'd love to hear from you. Happy colouring!